Hey, folks, welcome. We have an unboxing today, and joining us, unusually, is our very special guest, Mr. John Butterfield. John, hi, thanks for coming.
Hey, Ardwulf, good to see you.
And I'd love to emphasize that this was my idea, but it in fact was John's idea. So he expressed a desire to see an unboxing done by people who knew what they were doing, and that was not going to be the case with this game. So because I had not really paid super duper close attention to it, just because of bandwidth, right? But there's a lot of really interesting things on here. Reception, I think John has been really positive on this from what I'm hearing so far.
Yes, it's getting a lot of good response on Board Game Geek so
Mhm.
far.
Yeah,
It,
very good buzz.
yeah, it's been
Now,
out about a month.
that's about right. Just a few weeks, really. So it's new, but early buzz has been pretty strong. So this, I feel like we should talk about. This is a co-design with the late Chad Jensen,
Yes.
and I know that we had talked about this before, and you had kind of picked this up and had helped to finish this for Chad. How far along had Chad gotten with Downfall?
Well, it's a game he had been working on for about 10 years, and it had gone through several kind of conceptual iterations. He wanted to do a European theater of operations game. He loved games like Total or Krieg. And he and I had played Unconditional Surrender, although that came along later.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, by the time he passed away, he had resolved the game to be the way it is now, in that it's a game for two players, but each player controls two factions, and the two players are primarily playing the Western Allies, and the other player, the Soviet side, and each player is also controlling the Axis forces facing their opponents. So the person playing the Western Allies controls the Germans and their allies in the East, fighting the Russians, and the Russian player controls the Germans in the West, in the Mediterranean and in Western Europe, fighting the Western Allies, the Commonwealth and the United States. And so the real competition is between those two great powers as to, Germany will be defeated, but what will the map of Europe look like when that defeat is completed? And so that's where Chad landed with the game, and he also had designed this very innovative initiative system and order system by which you play the game, and it created a two-player strategic level game that had a lot of interaction because you go back and forth between whichever faction has the initiative, and an order is a kind of a small chunk of operations. It's either something like, move some of your units, conduct a few attacks, recruit, conduct strategic warfare, raise and deploy partisans, something that only takes a few minutes per order. So the gameplay is going back and forth all the time. And even in one side's order, the other side is doing things in reaction. So both players are constantly engaged in the game. And that, I think, that part of the innovation has made the game very popular in the early response. Uh, so Chad was also graphic designer. So when I inherited the game, he had a totally finished looking map, finished looking counters, finished looking cards, a couple of beautiful play aids, and not a word of rules. So uh, with Kai Jensen, his wife, who had been involved in playtesting the game with him, she and I kind of pieced together what Chad's intentions were. There was a little confusion because he was at the same time considering a more Euro version of this game, separate from, but maybe put in the same box. It was a plan he had for a while. That didn't happen, but a lot of his Euro game components were mixed in with this game, and uh, we had to figure out if a particular thing applied to this game or that game in order to piece together what the game was. So it is a co-design, but I would say Chad's name is a lot bigger in the pairing. That's for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, let's dig into it. So
Yeah.
we've got, typical good looking GMT box, 2-inch box, standard box. We've got a complexity rating of 5 out of 9 on the back and a solitaire suitability of 4. So it sounds like there is some hidden information.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up that solitaire rating because since I also designed solitaire games, I figured, well, since this doesn't really have a solitaire system, it should have a low solitaire rating. But I've been informed since then by people who play the game solitaire that it should have had a higher solitaire rating, like
Mm,
maybe a 6 or 7, because it is, even though it has hidden information in the action cards, which you play to gain advantages in your operations and in combat, that's the only hidden information, and it's simple enough uh, to kind of forget what's in the other hands of cards while you're making the decisions for the currently active, the faction that currently has the initiative. So, in short, I think after hearing that, I probably would have given it more like a 6 or 7 solitaire rating.
okay,
Um,
fair enough.
yeah,
All right, so let's open her up and see what we get. Now I've seen the components as I mentioned. Somebody had this on a table at Compass Expo, so and it's a very nice looking game and extremely well at securely shrink wrapped. That wow, actually, I don't normally have this much trouble with shrink wrap. All right, so
yeah. The cover illustration was done by Marco Villaro, I think his name's pronounced, and he did a beautiful painting for the
we're
for
gonna go with your pronunciation on that, John.
the.
So, but yeah, it's
I'm
nice.
guessing.
And it's also, I mean, aside from the fact that the painting is nice, it's got a nice punchy cover. I think this cover kind of pops despite the lack of bright colors.
Mhm.
You've got a really good contrast with the title up here. I think that it's a very nice box. All right, so I am going to first pull the map so that we can use that as a backdrop or one of the two
Okay,
maps. So
so you're
there's
not
there's
going in stacked order here. It's
No, no. I used to do that, but I'd rather go in because the folks watching will want to see the map, right?
yeah.
And this way, by doing the rest of the unboxing on the map, they can see the map. Um, so was Chad the map artist as well?
Yes, if you
Hmm.
look at the GMT page on this game, I don't think they've actually replaced his map with the production version that Mark Simonich did. Mark did um, kind of a freshening up and some color adjustments on Chad's map. But this is
Hmm.
basically, yeah, Chad's artistic concept.
Yeah.
And I think you can see that on the GMT page. Now, this is of course half the map. The map It's a
Yes.
2 map game, so here you're seeing the eastern half
Hmm.
uh, of the map.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
And actually, I think I want to put the other one down too because we've got a number of interesting things on here. So this is the Western Europe side of the map. And one presumes the highlighted hexes are victory point hexes or objective hexes of some kind.
exactly. So every hex outlined in red, and that includes the 3 strategic warfare tracks,
Hmm.
have that as well. Is an objective that uh, begins owned by the Axis, by the Germans, and ends up being controlled by either the West or the Soviets. And there's a track on the far left edge of the map that basically lists all those objectives, and you put markers there so you can see at a glance who's controlling it.
Yeah, and that's nice. That means that you don't have to sit there and move counters around to figure
Right,
out.
and one of the nice touches, Chad being a not only a graphic designer, but I think an expert information designer, laid out that track with the things that the Soviets tend to take first at the top of it, and the things that the Allies tend to take first, gain control of first at the bottom of the track. And so as it fills with markers, they get closer together, you know.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a
Berlin dead
nice,
in the middle.
yeah, yeah. Dead in the middle, I think is like Oslo.
Well, maybe, but Berlin's right here and Oslo's right here. That's some
Yeah,
good
yeah,
physical systems design right there.
yes.
All right, cool. So yeah, two maps there on what I would characterize as a pretty typical GMT paper. It's a sort of satin finishy stock. Feels good.
Yeah,
Along with
and
that,
GMT offered an option
hmm
as a separate item to buy the two maps mounted,
yes, yeah.
and that's sold out already.
Oh,
So
did it? Okay,
yeah,
I was about to tell people get them while they're hot. So
yeah. Well,
instead it's you snooze you lose.
right, but well, they are immediately going into reprint on that. That's the plan,
Hmm.
I've heard.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So this is the rule book, and it is a 44-page rule book. Not quite totally matte finish paper, but pretty matte finish. But the paper feels nice. And Chad was a really, really strong rule book writer, as we know.
Yes. So in this case, he didn't write the rule book. He hadn't written any
Hmm.
rules. However, I based the overall organization of this rule book on the approach he used in fighting formations and to some extent in Combat Commander.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a large portion at the beginning which is really going through all the game components and not only
Hmm.
saying what they are physically, but how they work in the game. And that's an approach he took in his rules writing that uh, I thought would really work here. And there's examples throughout. There's unlike other games. There's only one book. The
Hmm.
rules and all the examples of play, extended examples of play, the designer's notes, all the scenarios are in one book.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The rule book looks great. It's full color. Obviously, we do have some design notes on the back, which you wrote, of course. We have some extensive examples in the back, examples of land combat,
Right now, Bruce
multiple.
Mansfield, who
Mm,
co-developed the game with Jason Carr,
mhm.
he wrote the examples of play, and then based on his diagrams, Kai did the final art for the examples of play, and Kai laid out the rule book.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Now we've got what looks like I don't know 10 or so player aid cards here. Looks like there's some setup cards for at least some of the scenarios.
Yes, there for all the scenarios, there's 6 cards, so that's 12 sides because
Hmm.
there are 3 scenarios that start at different points in the war, and there's a setup card for each faction in each scenario. The Soviets, the Western Allies, OKW, which is the Germans in the West, and OKH, which is the Germans in the East.
Okay,
So you would find the 4 sides of the cards that uh, apply to the scenario that you want to set up. And then those 4 cards account for absolutely every counter and marker and card in the game.
that's
Uh,
fantastic.
so it's a complete way to set everything up.
So it
Um,
looks like there's a Husky scenario, which one presumes starts in mid 43, an
yeah,
Overlord scenario that starts in presumably mid 44, and then a campaign game.
yeah. So the campaign game begins in November 42. So the Axis high
Hmm.
watermark. And so and that was a decision that Chad arrived at. He felt once he went to this idea that it would be the West versus the East, that it should start at that high water mark, and it's about the downfall, the defeat of the Reich.
Thematically appropriate.
Yeah.
So here we have, oh, this is very clever, actually. So as you mentioned, uh, two players, right? One player is going to play the Western Allies and the OKH or Oberkommando des Heeres, which is the German part of the army facing the east, and
Yes.
we've got an orders card for them that goes through the Western Allies orders and the OKH orders. And then we have another. There's two of these, of course. So they're identical, but there's
Yeah.
one side is per. On the other card, we have the orders for the Soviets and the Oberkommando de Wehrmacht, which is the German forces facing the West.
Right. So those are depicting each faction's order markers. There's 12 order markers that each side has, and when a faction you control has the initiative, you select one of those 12 orders based on the markers available to perform. And you pay initiative. The initiative cost is shown just to the left of each marker there.
Mm-hmm.
And you could choose an order that only costs 2 or 3 initiative, and that may allow you to go again because the other players might be further along on the track with their markers, the other factions. But if you choose an order that costs a lot of initiative, there will be other factions going, maybe even more than once, before you can go again. So you're balancing you know the extent, the kind of time impact of the order you choose, with what is going on with what the other players are doing. That's part of the constant interaction in the game.
Going to point out that a for example, this recruit order is cheaper for the Western Allies than it is for the Germans. It's even a little cheaper than it is for the Soviets because the Soviets have been fighting for quite a while at this point. I don't know that you're going to be able to speak to this particularly, John, but this actually reminds me of the initiative system that is used in RuneQuest, oddly
Huh.
enough.
I don't think I can speak to that. I played
Yeah.
RuneQuest, I would say around 1980, and that was the last I played it.
Well, there's a new version of it out that came out about 5 years ago now. Still getting this weird pulsing deal.
Yeah,
Got to
it's
be a contrast problem. All right, so we've got two of these general player aid cards as well, identical. And on the back, we have what looks like a fairly straightforward land combat table.
yes, with this player aid, you really don't have to look at the combat rules in the book at all. It
Hmm.
covers the entire procedure, all the modifiers, and has the combat table itself. And then in the upper right corner is naval interception and combat.
Hmm.
Um, in this game, naval interception and combat is important in the early part of the game when Germany and Italy still have uh,
Navies.
Navy and submarines and that sort of thing. But by end of 43, that's pretty much done. Um,
Hmm.
so the Overlord scenario actually dispenses with naval rules altogether, and the rule book is marked so that if you're playing Overlord, there's a whole bunch of rules you don't have to read.
All right, so we have 3 counter sheets here, and these are on the nice thick new GMT stock. And I noticed that a lot of the counters are pre-rounded, which I'm sure everybody appreciates.
Yes, that's all the 5/8 inch counters, which are
Hmm.
all the combat units, and all of the order markers
Hmm.
are the larger ones.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna note I punched one out, John, because I was gonna complain, but I don't have anything to complain about. There
What
are
what were you
there is
hoping to complain about?
Where I'm a war gamer, I could complain. Trust me.
Yeah,
There are sedatives, but they are tiny. One thing I noticed though on the Mr. President counters is they're pre-rounded, right?
yeah.
But the connection points to the sprue are still on the corners, so they still have dog ears, even though
Oh,
they're pre-rounded.
it's
These are
definitely
not
not
like
the
that.
case with these.
Nope, that is not the case with these, and I've never seen that before. That was just weird. So obviously, we got our Soviets here in red. We've got our Axis powers, and
Yes,
do we have?
the dark ones are OKW and the lighter
Mhm,
gray are the OKH.
mhm.
And they
That
each
color
of
scheme
those have
works.
their own sets of the order markers as well.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. And are there different colors for like the miners too?
Yes. So the sheet you're looking at there is the Western Allies
Mm.
and the Italians and Romanians and Bulgarians and
Mhm.
Yugoslavians, Vichy French. Uh, so there's all kinds of, yeah, all the Axii miners are in the game, and
Okay.
they surrender at various points.
I also noticed that we've got what look like they almost look like block labels, where we have an orientation on the counter to indicate that it's got this British Second British Army, presumably, has one, two, three, or four pips, uh,
Yes, yes.
and
So
that.
the yeah, from four down to one, and the two sides of the counters are not for strength, but for unit type change. You
Mm,
can flip a leg infantry to become an armored infantry. You can flip a motorized infantry to become a tank army, um,
mm,
and so that's part of the way the game works. Armor units give you advantages in combat, but if you're attacking, armor is the first thing you have to lose. And when you lose armor, it doesn't lose a step. It flips from armor to being non-armored. So you still have a
hmm.
large army, but it's lost its armor capability
Interesting.
until
Well, it's
you
Army
do
level too.
an order, a mechanized order to regain your armor.
Huh. That's actually quite interesting. I'm really intrigued by this initiative system too. Let's take a look at the cards. We also get, oh, look at this. We get two sets of D6s, so four D6s in all. I like that color, that green color.
That was spec by Kai.
Was it?
She said,
Okay.
"Well, let's get a nice green, American soldier color, right, for the Western Allies to use, and red, of course, for the Soviets to use."
John, you have no idea how big a snob I am about this kind of thing. No idea. I mean, you probably you've probably encountered people as pedantic as myself, but no, I've got to have appropriately colored dice for any game
Right.
to such an extent that a lot of times when the whatever dice come in the box, they get thrown in the common dice fishbowl over here, and I put my own dice in there.
Yeah.
So we've got two decks of cards too, and they
What,
are.
may I ask, what tool did you use to open your card pack? What is that?
This is just a pocket knife.
Oh, okay. All right. Better than using teeth or fingernail. All right.
Exactly. Well, if you're doing it live on camera, I would just as soon not have to edit it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay.
this at least is relatively quick, and I only once or twice if I accidentally stabbed myself. So that's a plus. All right, so we've got these decks of action cards,
Yes,
and
so there's the Soviet deck, which you put right, and then that's the Western Allied deck, and that's
mhm,
the Axis deck. The two uh, German factions use the same deck.
interesting. Okay,
Uh, yeah,
okay, and then
and
we've got
those
some
are
mnemonic
little
cards here too.
aids. There's a card for each type of weather, and those cards just summarize some of the game procedures.
Oh, that's nice.
So all the effects of weather are shown on that card. So whichever weather is currently active, you just have that card on top of the
Yeah,
three,
yeah. Well,
and
that's great.
you can refer to that.
Well, we usually have to make our own improvements like this, John. This is a
And
great idea.
that was already done by Chad. See,
Yeah.
Chad had designed all the cards.
Huh.
And cards like that were what made the understanding of the game possible, because he put so much information into his player aids, into his cards, into his counters, into the tracks on the map, that we were able to figure out how the game worked from that.
Hmm. So let's take a look at the. Oh, wait, there's an events deck too. Okay, well, let's take a look at this then. So the cards themselves, would it be an accurate statement, John, as defined? Feel free to define this term however you like, but would it be an accurate statement to call this a card-driven game?
No, no, because
Okay,
these you don't play these cards to do things. You play these cards to improve things.
okay,
Like to get an advantage in combat, or to or to get an extra reinforcement. In some cases, to get a free attack as kind of on top of the order that you're doing.
hmm,
Things like that, or to cost the other side initiative. So that card you just are going through there with the little flags, those are HQ cards. You play those in a combat to get more strength and die modifiers in your favor. And
Okay.
when you play these cards, then of course they're discarded and is their one-time use. They may recycle later in the game, but they're intended to be the strength that your opponents don't know about, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's the one thing that makes the solo play a little tricky because these cards can sometimes be quite powerful or can swing a combat or allow you to do something your opponent didn't expect.
Okay.
Um, Now the event cards, that's what you're holding now. Uh, that event deck cycles through every game turn.
Hmm.
There's this system by which, as the factions move their markers along the initiative track, it triggers an event every now and
Hmm.
then. And every game turn is 4 months, and the movement of the markers all the way around the initiative track completes one game turn. And in the course of doing that, you cycle through most of these event cards. And so this allows things like supply, arrival of reinforcements, checks for surrender to happen every game turn, but at an unexpected time.
Hmm.
And also takes these things that normally become administrative parts of a sequence of play. There is no sequence of play. Instead, when the card comes up for supply, you check supply.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and then some of the cards are replaced by other cards. There's like 20 cards here, and at a given turn, you're using about 15 of them because there's a card that's in the early game when Germany's still in Africa, but a card will come up that says, if the Germans left Africa, replace this card with a different one. And it's going to be better for the Western Allies because it'll give them more logistical options once the Germans are removed from Africa. And then again, when the Italians surrender, you get the deck changes again a little bit.
Okay.
But some of these cards are come up every single game turn for the whole game. Like there's a card that gives the Soviet player 4 reinforcements, and it comes up once a turn. You don't know when, but they get those. Likewise for that card right under your thumb there, the other thumb, the gray,
That one.
yeah, that's giving the Germans reinforcements, and it
Hmm.
happens once per turn. And then the other things on the card, there's little symbols that look like cards in the upper
Yeah.
right corner. That's how you get your action cards. When an event card
Oh.
first comes up, that those factions get those number of cards. So that's 2 for the OKH and 2 for OKW. And then you see a little airplane symbol in the bottom of the card. That's how air units enter and leave play. At
Hmm.
any given time, 3 event cards are face up, and the sum of the air units depicted on the 3 cards is the amount of air units that are in play. Um, so that
Hmm.
varies. Air superiority comes and goes. It tends to favor the Western allies. They have more of these air symbols on the cards than the others. But it creates an ebb and flow to who has the kind of momentum in the game. Uh,
Hmm.
the
That's also really, really interesting. Kind of a dynamic sequence of play. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, dynamic sequence of play and a sequence of play that isn't actually printed in the rules.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I mean, the cards are on nice card stock, typical GMT, nice card stock. Really, that's
Yeah,
not a
yeah, they
surprise.
did a nice job with those. It was
Yeah,
Chad's design. Charlie Kibler did the final cards.
yeah. So we got a box insert, which will probably go into recycling, to be honest about it. But I
Yeah,
appreciate
so
the fact that
you need to remove it so you have room for your counter tray if you're doing a counter tray in your box or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I wasn't concerned about not getting the mounted map too, because I'd rather have the whole thing fit in the box and have plexi on it than um have to deal with mounted maps to store as well. All right. So that has been a relatively brief and somewhat technically glitch prone overview of Downfall with a special assist from the co-designer, Mr. John Butterfield.
Did you put
John,
the maps back in the box?
we'll fix it in post.
Well,
It's behind the
this
scenes.
has been fun.
All right, John, thanks so much for A, thinking of this in the first place, B, thinking of me of all people to be the lucky recipient of this absolute pleasure that it's been.
Uh, yeah, well, thanks for walking through the components. And if you're playing the game, you have any questions, Board Game Geek is a great place to go. A lot of them already been answered there. Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention there. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, looking forward to the game having a good life.
And I'm looking forward to playing it. Actually, I think this is something I might try to play at a convention in the near future. Let me put it this way. Maybe even here at the house. We'll see. All right.
Right.
Once again, thanks very much, John. It has been a pleasure.
Okay, have a good evening.
No, I didn't put the maps back in the box, but I like to kind of put the kind of center the box at the end of the video, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if there's like a lot of stuff to put back in, often I'll not put everything back in. I'll put it back in when we're done, just so I can have the box kind of as the focus for the end of the video. This I will put in as a special feature at the end.
Yes.